and get this meeting called to order. We'd like to welcome everybody here tonight and thank you for attending. As you're all aware, this has been a really difficult year economically for the district, and when we have a super tight year like this, the board is kind of obliged to explore different options regarding our financial status, and so that's what we're going to do tonight. In looking through the agenda, I think it would be best to move our patron comments section to after our discussion. So maybe after we'll give Mr. Larson and Mr. Ken a chance to do their presentation for us, and maybe that'll help answer some of your questions or give you some ideas on what questions you might want to ask. Now, for tonight's meeting, the board will entertain questions concerning possible solutions to the financial problems that we're looking at. So if you can kind of keep that in mind for the scope of this evening tonight. So with that, I would accept a motion to amend the agenda to move patron comments to right after item 3B.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we do move the patron comments immediately following discussion item 3B.
Okay, there's a motion by Trustee Perez. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Anderson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Larson and Mr. King.
Okay. So just real quickly, district policy 790.0, the first paragraph, the Board of Trustees is dedicated to sound and efficient financial management, recognizing the limitations and fluctuations in funding and the potential negative impact on the district's fiscal status due to historical revenue and or expenditure issues. The district must take specific action to ensure education remains a primary goal and responsibility of the district. In the event that the financial situation of the district necessitates such action, the board will consider a declaration of financial emergency. So just based on advice from legal counsel, that last line, we know that our fiscal situation has changed, and it says the board will consider. It doesn't say they might or they may, but that's really why we're here. So whether or not that action is taken, the board, per our own policy, needs to at least consider it. So with that being said, we're going to start, actually Daryl, I'm going to start with a presentation that has been shared with the board, and we're going to go over it with everyone here.
We're going to start back with the financials that were submitted to the board back on the 13th, just so you get an idea and help everybody else understand where we were standing at. As of that point in time, we were budgeting off of a support unit of 20.4 or 200.43 support units. Sorry, zoom in here. Make life a little easier to read. 200.43 support units. Support unit roughly averages about $145,000 a piece. These are all calculated and allocated to us based off of our average daily attendance of our students through the first few weeks of school. It's the midterm reporting. We have just the first few weeks to have as many students in their seats throughout the day, and that is what calculates our funding for the year for our salary apportionment, our benefit apportionment, and it just contributes to all those little areas there. From our local revenue, we had $2.7 million coming in through that. That's, again, supplemental levies, rental of buildings, some of the odd ends that we have here. State revenue, this is coming from that salary-based apportionment, highly tied to that 200.43. $8 million in discretionary, $16 million in salary apportionment, 3.4 in benefit apportionment, and then these others for reimbursements for transportation and exceptional contracts, a total of $30.6 million. Our other state revenue, these are revenues that are usually tied to certain programs or certain areas. One of our main sets of revenue here is like our literacy proficiency that can be used for K through 3 grades to help improve literacy. Our professional development, that's tied to training for staff, and then some of our technology funds. But again, keep in mind these funds that are marked in red, these are funds that are not part of the general fund. These monies come in on the state salary-based payments, on the foundation payments. They come in all together, but they go to these individual funds that are not part of the general fund. So they don't necessarily stay in this budget. So we marked it on here to keep it consistent and clear when we receive these payments so we can monitor them. But on our expense side, we pass them right back out into their own funds. So Fund 246 or Fund 435. These last few payments right here are not on the foundation payments. Our state broadband reimbursement helps cover our internet, our CTE and Perkins funds that go to those certain programs, our property tax replacement monies, and our transportation depreciation. That's about $2.6 million. Lastly, we had fund transfers in. These are monies that we were able to allocate in from different funds. So these are usually our federal funds, special ed funds, Title I funds. These are the indirect costs or the overhead costs coming from those that we can attribute and bring those back in to cover some of the operational costs of managing and delegating these funds. So that's about $236,000. Total revenues that we had at that time was $36.182 million. From the prior year, we noted that we brought in about $40 to $41 million this current year, fiscal year 2024. So for fiscal year 25, our revenues right there have already decreased $4 to $5 million. When we get into our expenditures, these are forecasted.
Real quickly, so with almost 5 million less in revenue, why is that? We know we don't receive the ESSER money any longer. Those monies run out. And that was 1.8 million that we had this year that we will not have next year. We received a one-time payment from the state of 1.1 million to help with the gap between enrollment and ADA. We won't see that next year, at least it's not likely, unless the legislature next session acts. Just in the decrease in support units, so Daryl mentioned that we were at 200.43. What should we have been at, or what were we at last year?
We budgeted at 212, we came in at 209.
So the decrease from 209 units down to the 200 that we're forecasting for next year was a decrease of 1.6 million. So just adding those things up, it's not that the district lost money or we're just not getting that extra revenue. Those monies are gone. And so now we're having to compensate for that.
Mr. Larson, would you mind just giving a general overview of what ESSER funds are for just people who may not understand what that was?
And when we started to receive those?
So the ESSER monies came out during COVID. The federal government stepped in and said, hey, we're going to give states all this money, to help with the effects of COVID and things to help prevent COVID and those types of things. They could have been used on HVAC systems, a wide variety of things that they could have been used on. Some districts used them on staffing to help, the lower class sizes, spread kids out more. That was the gist behind hiring more staffing. We could keep our class sizes smaller. We could spread students out. And it seems that is what Minidoka County School District did. Spent quite a bit of it on staffing. Let's see, what was the other question?
Just that.
Okay.
When we got it.
Oh, okay. And if I'm not mistaken, those monies came in about 4 years ago, and there were different pots of ESSER monies, different things we could do. They did extend it for this last year. But again, as of September, those monies are gone. That's when a teacher contract would start. They go September through August. And so really there's no way that we would have those extra funds to put towards staffing.
Okay, again, running with the 13th budget with the expenditures here. Salaries, we have the admin, certified, classified salaries, all those go together in their different departments and areas, total up $22.5 million just in salaries. Benefits for all of those, including health and dental, vision, all those, $10.5 million. Purchase services, this is outsourcing or having someone come in, any sort of speaker, any sort of service that we purchase is $1.9 million. Supplies and materials, pretty straightforward what those are, $1.9 million there as well. Capital purchases are big ticket items, anything usually over $2,500 a piece. This is really where most of our levy monies are spent, and there are transportation buses, $1.4 million there. Debt services, we don't have anything in here because all bond payments and everything are run through the bond fund. So any tax dollars received for the bond goes through the bond fund and goes straight into the bond and levies there. Insurance judgments, this is our property insurance is the majority of it, $295,000. Our fund transfers, these are those items that were revenues that came in. Just to show them, these are them going right back out, $947,000. Contingency, we have $10,000 here. This was one that we pulled from an expenditure line item that was tied to a special ed or a special services expense. Because it was tied to that section and it was coming out of our general fund and it had a normal or an average balance over the last 4 years, we wanted to make sure we kept it in case we needed it. So we put that into contingency to make sure that was there for that in case it was needed. All those overviewed right here. Salaries of 22.5, benefits 10.5, services 1.9, supplies 1.9, capital purchases 1.4, insurance judgments, fund transfers, contingencies. All those totaled up to $39.746 million. That is a $3.5 million deficit compared to our revenues. So in that alone, our expenditures are $3.5 million more than we have revenues coming in, which was causing our issue. As you look at this at the same time, staffing came in at 83% of this $39 million budget. If this was at our $36 million that we had, it was coming in at a higher, let me just do that for instance, just for visibility. If I throw that in at the 36 as our total, staffing comes in at 91%. And as Mr. Larson has mentioned to the board multiple times, a district really would prefer to see their labor costs at 80 to 85%, somewhere in there is ideal for a district. Again, this was the budget as of 5/13. We were able to meet this last week with admin and make some changes, some adjustments as best we could to resolve as much of this as we could on our own. Revenues, we ended up going up to a 202.25 support units. This came from our support unit calculation. I'll show that real quick just to make sure we understand that. For the current year, we had the transition from enrollment to ADA, the average daily attendance. Enrollment figures placed us at an average or an actual midterm support unit of 225 support units. When you deal with the school districts, they have what's called protection. Protection is what will allow you to basically be covered basically on the essence of an insurance basis when it comes to support units. You take your actual midterm, you take it by 97%, and that tells you your threshold. If you drop below this threshold, you will be protected. Although with this protection comes the cost or the premiums, just like you do have with insurance. So for fiscal year 23, we had an actual enrollment midterm support unit of 225. The protection would be at 218. we drop to 209, which is below the threshold. So we take the higher of the two, which gives us the 218.92. Cost of protection for this fiscal year was 4.41%, which was extremely high across the state. And this was directly linked to the transition from enrollment to ADA. All districts across the state really felt it, and that's why protection went up. Most districts dropped. So with that, the cost of protection was 9.6 units, which dropped us down to the 209 that we had to function with this year. For next year, we get to start with the actual midterm support units of fiscal year 24 is our 209.22. 97% of that gives us our threshold of 202.94. We are estimating that our actual midterm for next year won't really drop any. We are estimating this based off of the guidance of the other school districts in our region. Most of them aren't really seeing much change in their enrollment or their planned in attendance. So we followed suit with some of those, keeping our 209.22. We take the greater of those, minus the cost of protection would give us our New Year's funded units. Cost of protection is the one thing that's up in the air at the moment. The state has done a survey. Most districts show that their enrollment and attendance that they estimate will stay pretty flat, pretty level. There's still a little bit of ripples coming from the enrollment to ADA transition. So there's still a little bit of guessing game going on there. They've come in and said it'll be roughly between 1% to 2%. Where we do not have a fund balance at all, we have no wiggle room to be wrong.
So, real for clarification, the fund balance is monies that the district can keep in a separate fund. They don't show up in the budget, but if needed, the district could utilize some of those funds to help offset any overages that it may have. In the Minidoka County School District, 2 years ago, there was about a $3.4 million fund balance. Generally, that you would like 2 to 3 months worth to be able to, pay staff. 3.4 million in this district would be just over a month and a half. The problem is starting 2 years ago and into this year, the full fund balance was budgeted. So half of it for last year and the remaining half for this year. So moving forward, there is no fund balance anymore. There's no reserve. And so if we're off on this number, we may not be able to make payroll at the end of next year. And that's why we're being very conservative with our estimate.
So with this, we had that 3.33% of protection. When we first started doing our budgets, we were estimating a 4.2% is where we were working at. In order to cover the remaining expenditures that we had after all of our other cuts and adjustments, we needed to adjust this down to make sure we could submit a balanced budget to the state. And so we brought down this percentage. Again, the closer we get to the actual, the less wiggle room we have to ensure that we don't dip into a non-existent savings account, right?
Mr. Larson, so as we're talking about ADA, average daily attendance, do we know what our average daily attendance was that gave us the 209 support units? What was our attendance during the time it was being watched, I guess? What was our attendance at that point?
We're going to try and pull that up.
And maybe also explain that compared to when they did it by enrollment. Okay, what the difference is there.
Well, on the last slide that he had up, you could see the difference. I mean, we were at 225 support units when the district was funded on enrollment. And when we went to ADA, that dropped down to I think last year was down to 218.
218 for 24.
Yeah.
And that isn't our thing, that is the state.
That is from the state, yes.
So I'm going to do two things real quick. First off, we'll look at a little bit of a slideshow from Dean Reich. He is the attendance and enrollment specialist at the state. If my thing doesn't blow up here. The pieces that I really want to make note of. right here. So attendance is calculated based on having 4 hours of instruction, either 4 hours or greater, or 2.5 hours to the 4 hours. Students that are in their classes for more than 4 hours or at school for more than 4 hours count as a full day attendance. If they're only there for 2.5 hours to 4 hours, or just under 4 hours, it only counts as a half. This is for your standard schools. This is not your alternatives. Those are off of hours. All concepts there. But so let me jump to this next one. The ADA, or the average daily attendance, takes your aggregate days, or your total of your days, divided by your instructional days in the period. So if Timmy goes to school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, he's got 5 days that he's at school. This means he was at school receiving instruction for 4 hours or more. He was at school for 5 days. In our case, it would be a 4-day week, right? Divide it by however many days you have, that gives you your ADA, your average daily attendance. If we don't have school, that does not count against the students. If they do have school and they do not attend, that then counts against their ADA. So this week, Timmy only came to school 2 days. We only had school 4 days here. He only gets a 0.5 ADA. And this is based off of every seat. Every child's head count counts. When you get into some of the alternative schools, and summer schools, they go off of the hours instead of just a day or a half day type of deal. So our regular schools, including our JDC, kindergarten, and our summer JDC, they're all 4 hours or more, gives you that 1 or a half ADA. The alternative schools, they go off of your hours. So students that are scheduled to attend 2.5 hours a day may have their hours totaled per week. This comes in, they need to be at least 54-minute or periods a day. Kind of gives them this halftime. They get that halftime ADA. It's explained a little better in this next one for the alternative section. Basically, they need to have 25.5 hours of seat time at school in a week to classify them as a full ADA. Anything under that 25.5 hours does not give that student or that head count an ADA. Once the state classifies this, which all this comes in through our attendance, our enrollment through Power School, is sent directly to the state. They get it and they pull it into their system and they break it out, kind of falling like this. I'm going to zoom in just a minute so we can kind of see it here. So when we look at a school, so Asequa, for instance, they have grades kindergarten, 1st through 3rd, and 4th through 6th. We have their average daily attendance for those areas. Asequa apparently has at least 34 kindergartners or something a little higher than that. With those, they then have the factor of how much is divided by to get their units, and this unit is that portion of a support unit. The only piece they have on there as well is there's a 94% calculation here for special ed, special education, special services. 6% is pulled off of the top here to allow for that support unit allocation for those special ed services. So in this case, Asequa's kindergarten generates a 0.86 support unit, or a 5.85 1st through 3rd grade support unit, and 4.01 4th through 6th grade support units, for a total of 10.72 support units. These support units then get to go against these multipliers. One support unit equals a 0.075 of an admin. One support unit equals a 1.02 of an instructional FTE or a teacher, and a 0.079 of a pupil service staff or a counselor, for a total of 1.1. And it also generates a 0.375 of a classified. So this is your secretaries, your custodians, your para providers or prep providers, things on those ends. So these support units drive this whole factor. The one caveat to them is they only drive the general fund factors. Anybody paid out of other funds, special ed funds, federal program funds, this isn't going towards them. It only goes towards the staff that come and are paid through our general fund. And even those, they're paid based off of an average salary, and so there's always a gap between what the state pays and what we pay, and we have to pick that up through discretionary funding. Did that answer your question?
It did, and I'm wondering if our attendance were to improve by, say, 2 or 3%, would that have a good effect on our budget?
So we could take that here with this reduction. Instead of saying a 1.5 reduction, we could say, let's go the other way, a negative 1.5, saying, hey, we have a 1.5 increase in student attendance. That would take us to a 12.12. Take off our protection, we'd be at a 205.29. So it goes both ways.
Yeah.
If we can get more students attending during those first few weeks,
So just that 1.5% increase in attendance was a 3 support unit jump.
and again, just to throw that into figures, you got 3 support units at 145,000. That is 435. Did I do that right? That is right. Okay, $435,000.
And it would be 3 certificated staff as well.
3 more teachers. Thank you.
Remind me where we're at. Oh, we were just doing the
Doing attendance.
revenues.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, back to the revenues that we finalized this weekend and today, we're factoring at a 202.25 support units. Our local revenue has not changed. Our state revenue increased slightly because of discretionary, salary-based apportionment, and the benefit apportionment. All of these are tied to our support units. So an increase in support units is a slight increase in these areas based off of those fundings. Other state revenue did not change. Fund transfers in, we did make some changes here. If you'll notice, we have a lot fewer numbers here in the indirect costs. The reason for this is we took as much of our federal funds as possible and directed them straight into salaries. The more staff that we could pull out of the general fund and put into these federal funds means the less cuts we had to make. So we intentionally created budgets that were very much more restricted in travel, supplies, and any other purchases, and directed as much as we could straight into salaries and benefits to cover those positions. When we get into the expenditures, salaries are now at 20.225 million. Benefits at 9.3 million. Services, those are still at the 1.9. Supplies are still at, or went up to the 2.1. The increase here is because we took the bus routes. As the board has yet to decide which direction to really run with the buses, we put that $160,000 expense back in until that decision is made. Capital purchases are still at the 1.4 million. Insurance adjustments didn't change, neither did the fund transfers. The contingency went up to 40,000. This is because of the excess funding from the support units. We threw it straight into there to have the zero balance budget. That way we tie. In doing this, we are at a $36.4 million balanced budget. The main way that we got to these budgets was through salaries and benefits. This last weekend, we ran through positions with all administrators. We ended up deciding on some cuts that were being made to our Category 1, Category 2 contracts. We had 39.94 FTE or full-time educators positions from the certified. So these are teachers, just roughly 39 teachers, and 24 classified, so 24 support staff. Those were the cuts we made there. On top of that, through negotiations, we were able to freeze all salaries across the board, admin, classified, and certified. Freezing all salaries at this year's price point There'll be no movement up or down or left or right on the salary schedules. So education nor state advancements there will happen next year. That brought in roughly $650,000, which again brought us out of that $3.5 million deficit.
I mean, that's a big number to, I guess, to swallow. But when we were looking at the amount of a deficit we were in, the only way to really impact that number was through staffing. And as Daryl mentioned, we met with admin, a few times. And, first time we were able to cut a few positions, and it's not all cuts. There were some retirements in there as well. But through attrition, through the cuts, and then through transfers, we were able to hit a number that we felt good with that helped us balance the budget. And I know that, again, that is tough to swallow when the district for the last 3 or 4 years has been used to, more staff and able to keep classroom sizes down, able to have the extra help to help with student behaviors. It's going to be challenging moving forward, but really this was the only way to get there, because we can't submit a deficit budget to the state. And with no fund balance, again, there was just no way to overcome the losses in revenue that we took without, cutting positions.
Could we find out how many overstaffed of teachers or an administration that we had in our district? Per, I guess, per the state or however they figure it out.
We'll see if we can find that for everybody, but we do have that. With administration, I know at one point we were at 19.5 administrators. Now, one of those was covered out of special education funds. Another half was covered out of federal programs. So that put us at 18. We only get funded for 15 administrators. And so moving forward into next year, we will have one covered out of special education, and we will be at 15 administrators. And that's what we're looking to do with staff. Other certificated staff. Wait for Daryl to get this pulled up.
Sorry, I just have to find a spreadsheet that doesn't have names and stuff. Okay, so this is our classified. This is pulling from all funds that we were showing in here. This is kind of what we used with our admin to help determine how we're making our cuts as best we could. This takes our salary-based apportionment. So the SBA, this is what the state gives us money for. So the state was willing to award a CEQA 4.3 classified staff, or 7.7 to Hayburn, 7.44 to Paul. This is what those schools are generating in classified staff based off of their attendance, off of their average daily attendance. So that's where that was. We had our actuals to where we currently had our staffing. These were our final numbers where we kind of got stuff down. The big thing that you'll notice down here in the bottom, we have staffing in these main categories of special ed, district office, technology, federal programs, transportation, and maintenance. We, in those offices, have no contact with students, have no way of generating any sort of funding for these, right? All these positions either have to be covered through the support of these other areas or straight through discretionary funding. So any overage that we have in our allocations from the buildings that generate their own support means they have to pull from discretionary. If they're pulling from discretionary, it means that there's less discretionary to go around for these other areas. Overall, the state was basically attributing us 75 classified units, classified support, and we had 169 across the district in all our different areas. That's a 94 person difference. But again, these are numbers after reductions. They were higher before we got there.
And again, it's not unheard of for a district to be high in classified staff. As Daryl was explaining, we have areas that they don't generate any FTE, yet we still have to have those positions. And so, again, I believe every district is over on classified staff. It's just what can they live with, what can they afford to continue to pay.
As far as certified, this is where we got down to, again, when they attribute what is generated, it's generated based off of instructional staff and pupil service. So again, your teachers versus your counselors and areas there. In the end, we totaled it all up, took it against our actuals. We only had a couple sections that were over, or not over, they were under allocated, excuse me. So with that, the state is paying us for 220. We have 244. We have 24 staff that we are running through discretionary funding.
And that's after.
This is after. This is the final.
So we're still.
In all reality, according to what we generate, yes, we are over. According to what we can handle all in 1 year, that we're at the bottom of the bucket. If we go any deeper, we're not set to really take that big of a cut and still function.
Yeah, that was part of the discussion we had, with the administrators. We really felt like this was as bare bones as we could get without, I want to say the instruction's going to hurt without just killing it completely. We felt good with this number, and we felt that we would have enough discretionary funds to cover still the slight overage that we will have.
Just to add a little bit of context here as far as what other districts in our area are dealing with, most of them are dealing with the same exact thing. The difference they have is they have a fund balance. Districts like Twin and Jerome had made pretty hefty cuts this year, but not nearly as drastic as ours, because they can ride out another year or two on their fund balance and allow attrition to take some of their other cuts in following years.
These districts also started making cuts last year, where Minidoka decided to keep the teachers and staff that they had, paid out of these extra funds. And I say really there's no right or wrong, but the districts that started making cuts last year will also make some this year. They'll use their fund balance, make whatever remaining cuts they have to next year. As we didn't do that, we're having to make all our cuts in 1 year. Again, there's no fund balance to fall back on. And so it seems pretty drastic, but it's just all coming in 1 year.
Well, and one thing that I would like to point out or make sure that's known is that.
Sure.
I just said one thing that I wanted to point out or to make sure everybody knows is that, that decision last year, that's on the board. These two weren't even here last year, and so they've I think done a pretty phenomenal job of trying to get us where we need to be, and from what I've learned from this year, from the numbers they've showed us, we were able to. I mean, everybody liked having the extra staff. We all have kids here. We like the smaller classroom sizes, but we could do that when the money was flowing in from ESSER and from enrollment, and we're just simply not getting that revenue now, and we're still, even now, we're still over allocated for what the state reimburses us for. So we've kind of hit the point where it's time for the hard decisions. And I've been on the board for 5 years, and I think this is, for me, this has even been worse than the COVID years. There's been a lot of sleepless nights, and none of us want to see the cuts. But when our salary was, or when our budget was showing 91% salary and benefit, that's the only place we have anywhere to cut.
Russ, that's something I'd like to add too. I think for me, as we've kind of walked through this path, the thing that's opened my eyes is we were at, what was it, like 280 something units we had before the cuts. We were allotted 224, essentially is what the state was going to cover. And our contingency fund a couple of years ago, you mentioned, was $3 million, and that only covered salaries for a month and a half, 2 months. That $3 million seemed like a pretty decent amount of money sitting in there until the numbers didn't add up anymore, and we realized we were way overstaffed according to what the state said we should be at. That $3 million got eaten up extremely quickly. And that was, again, these two gentlemen at the end of the table weren't involved in those earlier budgets.
So then, really,
Moving forward.
So moving forward, we had initially cut 13 positions on Thursday when we met. We cut another 26 positions. This is certificated for a total of 39. And again, that's with some retirements in there. There are different contract types that teachers are on. If a teacher's on a Category 1 contract, they automatically have to apply for a job next year. We just don't get to turn around and say, here's a contract, but that's in state law. So between Category 1 and Category 2 contracts, teachers, we cut 39 positions. We did, that meant transfer. So all the admin got together and said, okay, well, I have this teacher, what are they allowed to teach if it's a K-8 certificate? Well, obviously they're at an elementary school, they can actually move up to middle school. Some of our secondary high school teachers could move down to middle school. And so there was a lot of that going on, but we really did try to save as many positions as we could. But 39 certificated positions and 24 classified positions is what we ended up cutting to make this a balanced budget. And then again, we had to reduce that percentage, the cost of protection in order to get our support units to increase, just to give us that little bit extra revenue. I know last week Daryl mentioned he felt better at the 4.2%, but we just couldn't get a balanced budget at that protection cost. At 3.3%, I don't think the cost will come in that high, so we're likely to be safe, but if it doesn't, it'll be for a very tight year next year. And we'll just really have to watch that. And so really that leads us to this meeting, the declaration of a financial emergency. Could you pull that back up?
I know there was the comment about the bus, some savings there. Do we want to go in more detail on what that is? Because I think that makes a difference to people understanding what that means if we potentially take that route.
I'm going to say your sheet here. But,
Carrie.
so
Harry's here.
Hey, Carrie, would you be willing to just talk about the 3 routes versus going back to 2? So Daryl had mentioned earlier there was a potential savings of $160,000. Um, and
Well, right now, kind of all we're looking at all options. Any way we can save some money and hopefully be as minimally disruptive to our kids as possible. So, if you want to, and the board hasn't decided anything on this bus route. We just asked transportation if they could look into it and see if there was a potential savings there or not.
And pros and cons, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So the cost stuff's up there. Daryl put all that together. Well, combined effort, I guess. But
You got a little bigger, Daryl.
I talk really loud.
Is it on?
Huh? I gotta eat it. I don't talk loud. That's why I use a microphone on the bus. So we're doing 3 routes 4 times a day, which actually means we're running 12 times a week. When we did 2 routes 5 days, that was 10 routes. So you're automatically 2 more routes over in expenses of gas and then it adds up to everything else. You got more wear and tear on everything, more oil changes, more brakes, tires, all that. We tried to cut costs by going to gas buses instead of diesel because the cost of diesel stuff is astronomical. So we tried to cut costs there. So we've had to Mod Podge because we are so understaffed. So it's become a really big mess to begin with. Our favorite plan isn't a favorite of administrative people and teachers necessarily, but you think we're not getting kids home till 4:30, 5:30 already. So our favorite plan is going to no transfers and every bus driver picks up only their own kids and takes only their own kids home. That means that all of the buses would show up at Minico, pick up only their kids, and then disperse to the junior highs, and then pick up only their kids, and then go to the elementaries and pick up only their own kids. It's a lot of buses at the schools. That means we can't start picking up until Minico gets out, which puts us at the elementary schools at 4:15. I would love for elementary and junior high to get out 15 minutes before we even show up, because then parents are cleared out, kids are cleared out, we don't have to fight, and then all of our buses can fit. We can't do that with Minico because that's a chaotic mess, and then that would put us even further behind. We could potentially keep our Mod Podge and go back to 2 routes. The problem we have there is the kids are getting more and more out of control. Last month alone, we issued 22 tickets and 14 were suspensions. It's a lot. It's just adding up. I did 4 more today. They're done for the rest of the school year. It's just they're getting out of control. So if we went to only our own kids on our own buses, you'd have more control. You'd know who belongs on your bus. You know their behaviors. You know who they talk to. You get to know them. And I love that rapport with my bus. The transfers are hard. They're really hard because they can get away with anything. You don't know who they are. You don't know their parents. You don't know where they live. And you only see them for 5 minutes, and we're in such a rush. So it's hard to control them. I don't know what else. Anybody questions? You guys got questions?
Well, anyway, you put these numbers together for us and going through all maintenance, wear and tear, depreciate or fuel, everything. it was an area where there could be some potential savings if that's the way the district chose to go.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
that's the kind of things that we're looking at right now. Kind of everything's on the table.
Yeah. I mean, you'd cut your, like I said, we're running 12 routes a week right now. Essentially, you cut it down to 8.
Right.
So, I mean, it would.
Well,
Cut
thank you for
something.
letting us put you on the spot.
Mr. Larson, before we go too much further, I just wanted to, if I could, on Friday we were here and we had negotiations, and I wanted to let everyone know how incredible our teachers are, in that when it came time to talk about budgeting, it was the teachers that proposed we want to make no more cuts if we can, and they proposed even freezing salaries. I was touched by that. We've had many sleepless nights thinking about the difficult decisions that are being made. Um, and our teachers care so much about our students, so much about their colleagues, that they put that forward. And I know that couldn't have been easy for them to do that, but it really put us in a situation where we might be able to come to a zero budget. And I think before we get into comments or anything, I wanted to recognize how incredible our teachers and our administrators really are to come together and figure that piece out. So,
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so all that information leads us to the possible declaration of a financial emergency. And this is in Idaho code, but we have policy on it. Again, it's something that the board needs to consider. They will consider it. As we go through this, scroll down just a little, to those. So really, there's certain criteria that have to be met in order for the board to declare a financial emergency. These first three we have no control over, and so we don't even have to get into those. These are things that the state has done to districts. They've either cut funding or they've done something at the state level that impacts what we can or can't do and the amount of staff that we can have. So really the district is concerned with letters D and E. So D doesn't really fit our situation, but dealing with property tax revenue and a percentage that it has to be. So then, with all the decreases in funding and the loss of revenue, it's really E that we were looking at that even might fit for our purposes. The district's general fund has decreased by at least 1.5% from the previous year's level due to a decrease in funding or natural disaster, but not as a result of a drop in the number of support units or index multiplier calculated pursuant to Section 1004A Idaho Code, or a change in the emergency levy. So we're looking at the decrease in our general fund. Unfortunately, those ESSER dollars at 1.8 million, we don't get to count those. Those were federal funds that went to the state, so we have to take them out of the equation. The 1.6 million that the district lost when they switched from enrollment to ADA and our support units decreased, we don't get to count that 1.6 million. The 1.1 million that the state gave this last year, that was also due to the enrollment to attendance, we don't get to count that. So really the number we're looking at is a $1.6 million transfer from the fund balance, the district's fund balance, into our general fund. I did call the State Department last week and I was trying to get some guidance on whether or not we even fit this requirement. And they didn't say yes or no. The feeling I had was they were trying to dissuade me from going this route. And I say me, but it's in talks with the board. They told me that only once in the last 15 years has an Idaho district declared a financial emergency. They did say that one tried to do it last year when a levy didn't pass, but they didn't end up needing to. They said it's just used so infrequently, and you really have to be careful and they said talk with your legal counsel, as it's legal counsel who would have to represent the district in case certain things happened. And so, I was in with Ashley Johnson when this call came in, and that really was, it just felt like do everything you can to not get to this point. There are, I don't want to say benefits. I guess it depends on how you look at it. But if the board were to declare a financial emergency, one thing they'd be able to do is reopen negotiations. Well, we're not even finished with negotiations yet, so that's off the board. That would be something if mid-year we realize, hey, something didn't come through like we were expecting, then we could possibly do it at that time. But we could reopen negotiations, and we could look at things like furloughing days or things of that nature. I guess another benefit, some of the timelines as far as getting contracts out to staff, we wouldn't have to follow the timelines because we're trying to deal with our financial crisis. Really, because we have figured this out through the attrition and through staff cuts, I don't see a need to declare a financial emergency. And along those lines, I don't see a need then for the board to declare a RIF. I just, even though we're still over, according to the budget that Daryl has gone through, I've looked over, I think we're covered. And if we can avoid more cuts and more rifts, in talking with the MCEA presidents, Daryl and I met with them not last Friday, the Friday prior. They said, really, whatever you have to do to hit that number, but if you can avoid a rift, some of these people that have been in the district a long time, they remember what happened and how it tore the community apart. These are the stories that I was getting, and staff and people are getting rift that way. And it's not just category 1 and 2 contracted teachers. You're looking at renewable contracted teachers and programs that are being cut. And so their recommendation at the time was to avoid that if we possibly could. And I think we have done that.
Well, that is a relief. We certainly want to keep as many positions intact as we can. It's already going to be a tough year, and we certainly don't want to. I'd rather have a tight budget, or personally, my personal opinion is to have a tight budget and keep as many of our people in place as we can. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Mr. Ken or Mr. Larson? And one thing I think I neglected to mention, we have a form over there. It's our request to address the board form. We fill your name out, and so we can make sure it's spelled right for the record and everything. Is there anything else you guys have for us? With that, I think we would open it. If has there been any requests turned in yet, or does anybody have any comments or questions regarding our discussion? Probably. Sure. Yeah. And can you please state your name for the record and grab a mic, please?
Mr. Sukan, can I maybe recommend we take a brief recess, allow people if they want to sign up to do that, and then
That would probably be
come back in?
That would probably be a great idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I neglected to mention that when I opened the meeting. And so let's just take a 5-minute recess real quick and allow anybody that wants to speak to grab a request form over there off the stage. Thank you. Okay, I think for the sake of time, we'll try to get going again here. If everybody wants to grab a seat and make sure you hand carry your request to speak forms, please.
Before Chairman Sukan opens up for public comment, I had mentioned the cuts that were being made, and they're pretty substantial. And as a board where everything's on the table, I mean, as of last board meeting, I mean, those are the things we're considering. Some of these cuts did come, and so I'm just going to be upfront by moving back to half-day kindergarten. And we were able to again reallocate those teachers and that weren't needed in kindergarten into other positions. But that is the change that the board would have to vote on at some point coming up as those cuts are in our figures.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Larson. Okay, with that, I think we'll get going. Once again, I just wanted to reiterate for the sake of time tonight, we really just want to entertain comments concerning possible solutions to some of our financial problems facing the district. If you have any other concerns, we sure welcome you to come to our regular monthly board meeting. Okay, on this, yeah, depending on how many people we have, policy says we have a 3-minute time limit. Mr. Cotton will probably keep track of that for us and keep us on task. So, yeah, if there's anybody else that filled theirs out, if they want to bring it up and hand it to Ms. Tibbetts, that'd be great. Okay, with that, the first one is Mrs. Reading. If you'd like to come up.
So my concern is because we are based on attendance, I want to see the district somehow hold parents accountable for getting their kids to school. I can't do that as a teacher. I can't go wake up my 27 kids and get them there. So the district needs to hold them accountable too. I know we have attendance court, but it's a joke.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Kevin? Sorry, Kevin, could you state your last name? I didn't want to
Well, tomorrow we all vote, so it's vote.
vote. Perfect. Thank you.
Good evening. I had a question. I did not hear in regards to when you explained about cuts, in regards to you said something about the category 1. And I don't know if you had some numbers up there. I could not see that. But in category 1, where do the double dippers that are retired, drawing on Percy, coming back and having a job, they have to, I think you mentioned something about reapplying for job. That can't be promised to anyone. And but I don't see any cuts in regards. Are those eliminated? Because I have a question in regards. There are several of those out there that could save you some money. Also, I'm not sure I could see in how much in administrative is allocated per the enrollment figure per each building. Was that up there? To see that if you have a principal, then how much do you get based on the ADA per building? So there's some that may be over or don't meet. And so there's another position or two that could be eliminated or repositioned.
So in regards to teachers retiring, um, there's nothing in Idaho code that would prevent us from hiring them back. You are correct that the position would need to be opened up and they would need to go through that process, much like a Category 1 teacher. A retired teacher would be put on a retiree contract, which is a 1-year contract, just the same as a Category 1, much like a Category 1. But yes, we cannot promise positions, so anybody who is retired would need to submit a letter of interest. Yes, I would like to come back, but they cannot be promised a position.
So at this time, has those that have that 1 year contract there been notified, had a letter sent to them that they need to do that?
I've had those discussions with administrators today, and we will make sure that that's done. My understanding is that has not been the practice in the past, at least not across the board. And so we're trying to become uniform in what we do and follow Idaho code and our policies.
Thank you.
And you had a second question regarding the funding of administrators. That was up there, a support unit. You take that support unit number, and so just for our sakes, is that 200? It's really going to be 202, but 200 times 0.075, and that's what would be generated for an administrator at each building. Some buildings are actually under, such as Minidoka High School. They qualify for 4 administrators. They only have 3. We have some schools that such as the Sequa, that aren't quite at a full, but together we can use those how the district sees fit. We pool those together, and that's really, we're looking at the bottom line of that 15 administrator, and that's where we're going to be for next year, is right at our number.
Okay. That's what I could not see previously there.
Okay, Ruben? Yes, please.
Well, thank you very much.
Could you
My
say
name
your
is
first?
Ruben Saldana,
Thank you.
and I know what you're going through. I've had to do cuts like this in the past on both the administration and the receiving side of it. So, but I do have lots of friends and that are in teachers, so I'm told I'd be here and speak on their behalf. But the question I had, you talked about state and federal income that you were getting that is no longer there. Was that a 3-year plan, a 4-year plan, or I guess what I'm trying to understand the budgeting on that.
I wasn't here when those funds started coming into this district. It has been my practice that in districts I have been in, when one-time monies come in, you don't use them for staffing, or at least very little of it.
Correct.
And I think this district decided to do things a different way. And a lot of those dollars were used on staffing. I won't say all of them because I don't know. And so I don't know what the plan was 3 years ago.
Okay, so it's, now that those funds are gone, it's we're kind of in a predicament trying to budget and do pull from Paul to pay Peter. In other words, okay. My next question: school resource officers, are they going to be impacted?
No, school resources are actually out of Title IV for this district. So both the one from the Rupert Police Department and the Minidoka County Sheriff's Department, they are both funded completely out of Title IV federal dollars, so not part of the general fund.
Okay, and what did you mean by classified staff?
So classified staff in our system or understanding is anybody that is not certified. So you have your certified admin, so admin who hold a teaching credential or their admin credentials. Your certified teachers have some sort of teaching endorsement, a certification coming from the State Department of Education. Your classified staff are more of those hourly staff that may or may not have a credential, but they're operating in a position that is a hourly position. A lot of times this is going to be your my custodians, transportation, para professionals, all those support staff is in that area.
And also, as far as staffing for administration folks, has there been any thought process as to sharing resources? That let's say a principal from a CEQA would end up somewhere else for half a day to help out. Has that been considered?
Mr. Larson might be a better option here, but as far as his iterations for admin distribution and setup, I know the few that he worked out with me were above 20 or 25 different iterations of how best to do this. But we do have that being shared, not necessarily in the principal stage, but in our vice principal stage for certain. We have some spread across middle schools and elementaries.
And then last but not least, the budget for the, those who are going to be laid off, about 64, is that correct? They're all under Percy. Now, it's been a while since I've dealt with Percy, but when are they pretty much set? They're locked in. Is it a 3-year plan they got to be employed? 5-year?
It's a 5-year investment. As far as that time frame, all these staff, I'll paraphrase. Yeah, everybody should be receiving their final paychecks from this contract in August, which then
Certificated staff, teachers would.
You're classified too.
Okay.
Yeah, classified and certified. Their final pay is in August. The only issues we have that are different there is your administrative staff. Their final pay is in July, and so they've got that spacing. But until that point in time, they are technically still employed with the district as far as Percy is concerned. For benefits, would term in September. So for those that their final pay is in August, their benefits would carry through to the next month.
Okay, so and speaking from the corporate world, is there going to be any kind of severance package given to the employees that are being discharged?
Well, you can have that.
That has not been discussed. Based on our financial situation, I would highly doubt it.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Ms. Tibbetts, were there any more sheets turned in? Yeah. Sure. Yeah, we will. Yeah, certainly take additional comments. Okay, Lauren, would you like to come up?
I just had a question about the budget. You guys
Can you
had,
state your
oh,
first and last name,
yeah,
please?
my name is Lauren Lake. Um, my question about the budget, you guys had mentioned that you guys had lost 1.8 million in funding because of the ADA or the loss in ESSER funding from the federal government, and 1.6 million was lost because of a decrease in attendance, which comes to 3.4 million out of the 3.5 that you guys had mentioned you were in deficit of. But then you said that you had 3.24 million in additional slush fund. Um, so my question is, what was the additional 3.24 million plus the $200,000 spent towards? Was it just bloated salaries, or why was the fund diminished? And maybe that just wasn't answered properly in what you guys had said.
Well, I'll go ahead and start. Yeah, we lost that funding of roughly 3.5 million in revenue. That slush fund was the fund balance money that the district had as of 2 years ago. They were at 3.4. They used half of it last year and the remaining 1.6 this year. So that money's gone. There is no slush fund or fund balance anymore beyond this year. And even then, that was put into the contingency to make this year's budget balanced. And yeah, it's just gone.
And just on that too, that we went from enrollment to ADA not this year but the year previous, and so we were already highly overstaffed at that point, and that's why we had to over the last 2 years we had to use that to
Yeah,
pay salaries and yes.
Mr. Kent mentioned several times, you know, we're funded or allocated funds based on the number of teachers in our general fund. And so when we're over, if we get funded for 220 and yet we're at 260, there's 40 teachers that we have to pay for somehow out of discretionary dollars. And when you're that high or highly overstaffed, it goes quickly. Because it's not just the salaries; it's their benefits that we also don't receive, the Percy, the medical insurance. That those are things the district does that we don't get funded for.
Thank you. Was there anybody else that would like to leave a comment or had questions that didn't have a chance to fill out a form? We would gladly hear from you.
Excuse me, Wayne Shank. And if the board was aware, which I'm assuming they were, to spend their savings, what was your plan when the savings ran out? Were you hoping that the revenue would increase enough with sales tax and so forth and the legislature? Or was there no plan? What was the board's thinking 2 years ago when they used half the savings and this last year when they used the rest of the savings? What was their plan moving forward?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. I was on the board last year when we passed this budget, and we passed the budget with the information that was provided to us. And at the time, we were budgeted at 212 support units, and we thought that was an appropriate number. Obviously, looking back, with the benefit of hindsight, we should have been making cuts to our staff probably over the last 2 years. But I think, and I don't want to speak for the rest of the board. I'll just give you my opinion. With all of the issues we've been hearing about from our teachers, all of our student achievement scores. Honestly, our staff is our tools in our toolbox, and we wanted to keep them on as long as we could afford to. I don't know if that completely answers your question. If anybody else,
I would also say that the part that was important is when they switched over, when the state switched from ADA to or from enrollment to ADA, that last year, even they were working on trying to get additional funding because the state was made aware that they had caused a huge rift, and so they were trying to adjust numbers and different things like that. And at the time of us doing our budget, the state had not even determined yet what was going to happen, and so we were budgeting on a guess. Uh, to some degree, like how Mr. Kent referred to on our protection, we don't know the exact number yet. So we were being told, hey, this is what we're going to get from the state, and at the end of the day, the state funded about half. They actually said they were going to do it, and then they end up only giving about half of what they had promised. So that additional funding that we were talking about earlier, the 1.1 or million or whatever, was actually supposed to be a decent amount more that the state never came through on their end. And so some of it was that when we had to have our budgets in by law by June, but the state had not quite determined even what they were going to give us as budgetary numbers.
I'd like to just add on to what's being said here, and just from my perspective as well. I think we, as a board, and I have my name attached to the last 2 years' budgets as I've been on the board for the last 2 years, I think we did make a mistake. I think what Mr. Claridge said is accurate. We didn't have all the information, but we did know that there was staff that were on ESSER funds, and it was hard decisions to make, and we probably should have made them earlier. I wish that I would have, looking back, because it would have maybe helped prolong this, or maybe even stay out of this particular situation. That being said, I do want to take ownership because my name's attached to it, but we also, in my opinion, didn't have the leadership necessary as a board in order to make the proper decisions as far as the superintendent. Mr. Larson has stepped in. He was able to see very quickly that we were in a bad way, and he started helping us to make very difficult decisions. When I came onto the board, I didn't feel like that leadership existed. I felt like we were presented with choices. We probably should have made some of the more difficult ones at that time, but we were also presented with, well, maybe we can hang on a little bit longer, maybe things will smooth out. And I went that way. I can't speak for anyone else. Mr. Larson has stepped in from day one and said, you're not in good shape. We've got some bad times ahead of us, and let's start discussing it. And so, I own some of those decisions because my name was attached to those budgets. I do feel like we have better leadership in place now. We're going to be in a very tough situation this next year. But I think with Mr. Larson's leadership, we can find our way back to smooth ground sooner than later.
I have to agree with that. My name is also on that budget. And I know with the ESSER fund, the way it came in, we were all excited to get that money, that extra money, because that gave our teachers extra help in the classrooms. And when you have a hard time in the classroom with some of our children that we are trying to educate, they need that extra help. They knew when the ESSER money ran out, our administrators did, that there was going to have to be some cuts, some hard decisions. We probably should have done that again a couple of years ago. But we were told with the numbers we were getting that we was going to be able to make this work. I agree. Mr. Larson has come aboard. I feel like he's sailing our ship in the right direction, and I feel good about it now.
Mr. Shank, if you don't mind, and Mr. Chair, the one piece I would like to add to this, no fault of the board, all fault on me and my department this year. When we came in and we had the transition, ideally this board would have had finished financials for the prior year somewhere in August through October. Those financials were not finished or turned in and finalized until January. So half of their year was already expended before they were able to even see the final rollover of last year. So the aftermath of a year was already past and kind of a little too late, and that is on our end. I won't take full credit, but honestly, it is something. If we had been able to have a smoother transition in and had records that we could jump in and just get straight forward and ready, it would have made a difference. They could have made an action or some sort of plan in first semester to enact in second semester to help smooth this over.
thank you for your straight answers and your willingness to go and admit that with the information you had, you made the best decision that you could at the time, and you chose a direction that you hoped would work out. With hindsight, it didn't, and now we will deal with it. My next question is moving forward, with moving now to attendance funding instead of enrollment funding, and as more and more people do homeschooling or alternative schools, are we in a death spiral as far as not being able to have enough attendance to continue?
I don't believe so. Yes, there's work for the school district to do. I'll be working with the administrators. They'll be working with the staff at their buildings. Um, a couple of things. One, we should be making education relevant and meaning for the kids, meaningful, so that they'll want to be here. And that doesn't always work. A comment was made earlier about holding parents accountable. Well, a lot of times, the elementary kids, they can't help it if the parents aren't getting up and bringing them to school or getting them ready for the bus, and that's no fault of the kid. But we have to try everything that we can do to get them here. But if we can do that, that'll help the attendance. I understand there might be a charter school opening up in the next year or so that could potentially take some of our students away. We're going to have to budget accordingly. For next year, we didn't budget a decrease in attendance or worse attendance, if you will. But if that happens, we'll have to continue to look at trends. Okay, over the last 5 years, but we keep updating that so we can get a good grasp on what's happening. And if that does take place, then we'll budget accordingly, so that we won't be over on our numbers. And really, that's the only way to do it. That's all I have for you.
Appreciate that. And then the last thing is, as we move forward in this, and this is for everyone in this room, because this is going to affect all of us, either directly or indirectly, from friends and family that we know. We all are going to go and pull together, and we're all going to have to go and have our morale boosted by each other. So I'd encourage you to go and reach out to those that are directly affected and help them through this time of transition. And hopefully, as we value education and as we can try and get parents to value education, because it starts with the parent, then we make a difference for the child. And that makes the job for the teacher that much easier. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shank. Did anybody else have any comments, questions? Sure.
So several people have approached me about oh my gosh, you know my name. Why do I need to do that? Nicole Toner. Sorry. Um, so several people have approached me about have we looked at every avenue possible to cut? Have we've installed a lot of equipment. We've installed Chronos. We've installed all this stuff that we no longer use. Have we looked at ways that we can get rid of that to save a classified? Have we looked at a way to save different things? Um, 5 people in technology, the person somewhere that puts the stamp on the envelope and that person takes the envelope to the mailbox. Have we checked every place available that we could maybe crunch more to keep people in the classroom?
There may be still some areas to look at, but we have looked pretty in depth at all these areas. As far as programs, I guess let me add a little caveat. Certain things that you mentioned, Chronos. Well, right before I started, the district entered a 3-year agreement, a 3-year contract, and there are a lot of issues with that system. And so, trying to get out of a contract, we're looking at that and what it might cost us to get out of that. Another caveat that I'll add: a lot of the funds that, while the majority of it goes to staffing and benefits through the salary-based apportionment, there are certain pools of money that we can't use elsewhere, and we have to use it exactly like the state tells us to or the federal government tells us to. We can't pull school nutrition money and use it for staffing in the classrooms. That's just not allowed. We get money for classroom technology. Well, we have to submit reports to the state on how we utilize that money, and it's got to be spent on classroom technology. And so, no, we don't have a lot of flexibility in how we use a lot of these funds. It really comes down to our discretionary money, and that small pot of money has to then be used for everything outside of salaries and benefits. It's what we have to give maintenance for their meager supplies. It's what we have to use. So just so people are aware, when we have unpaid meal balances, that can't be paid for out of our school nutrition. That's one of the rules they have in place. Can't use federal dollars for that. So the district has to pay for that out of its discretionary funds. And so the bigger balance we have in unpaid meals, well, that's a cost to the district. So we still have to budget for those things. But yes, we have looked pretty in depth at other areas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Um, Anybody else?
Lorna Romrell is my name. If you need me to spell it, I can. It's a tricky one. Romriell. Pretend the I's not there. The English language, I tell you. Anyway, I would just like to tell you guys I appreciate all the hard work. I'm sure it's been extremely hard. Um, sorry, as a mom, I'm just a mom with 5 kids, and we've gone through these schools, and I see all these wonderful teachers that my kids have been blessed with. I feel bad for them, for the teachers, not my kids. My kids can be a lot, especially a couple of my boys at the high school. But I just want to say I appreciate all the hard work, and it breaks our hearts as a community to lose the ones that we've lost. And as parents, I hope we can come together and support the teachers in the classrooms that are going to be it's going to be rough next year for them. And I was wondering if there is something as parents, other than of course just going to the teachers or whatever, if there's something we can do as volunteers, as grandparents, to help this transition, for these wonderful teachers and the sacrifices they do for our kids, if there's a plan for that. And then I had one more question. Um, uh, is there a plan to set aside fund? I know this year's tough. Is there a plan to set aside for the slush fund or whatever you called it?
Okay, I'm going to take that first one and I'm just going to hit it off the top of my head. I'm not sure. But as a grandmother, as a parent that my kids went through this school too, and I have grandkids in the school district now, I think the best thing that we can do for our teachers and our administrators is go in and ask our teachers and administrators where we can help. I don't think a lot of us can even, I know parents work. I understand that. We do. But I think there are some that could, even if they could spare an hour a day or whatever, and that would help. Even if it is out there helping with the buses when those loading those kids up, um, anything could help. And I think I would suggest that the parents hit their administrators up and see where they can help with anything that is available.
Before we address the contingency fund, I'd like to also add, I hope that we've covered it, but in my opinion, one of the greatest things that we can do as parents, and I have kids that are in this district, is we need our kids to be at school. We need them to be at school on time. We need them to be there for the entire day. I understand things are going to come up. Kids are going to get sick. There's going to be other circumstances. But as much as we can, parents, we need our kids to be there because I don't want it to seem like numbers, but truthfully, we're talking about teachers right now that we can't keep on because we don't have the funding from the state because we are based upon attendance. So please, if you want to know how to help, get your kids to school, and that is going to help more than you can imagine because that will allow us to hopefully, as we get back in the right place financially, bring more teachers back on because we have the proper funding to do that. So that would be my plea to parents: is get your kids to school, make sure that they're there and staying there.
I'm going to piggyback on that. I live across from Rupert Elementary, and I'm sorry, I'm not spying, and I don't know any of the parents, but I see parents dropping kids off 20, 30 minutes late, and the teachers have already started. And I had a teacher say, "Why are those buses so late?" I said, "It's not them, it is the parents." And the kids coming in with a coffee cup in elementary, and it's like, okay, well, they had time to do that, but they can't get to school on time. And the teachers already started their reading or whatever. And so I have to agree with Trustee Perez. Parents need to be held accountable somehow.
Not to be a Debbie Downer, I'm going to add one piece, caveat to their piece there. We would love to have you help and volunteer in our schools. My wife has done it prior years. On our one side that we have to do legally is we need background checks for anybody that does come in. And so if you need that or would like to, our office will gladly take care of that. It's about a 1 to 2 week turnaround. So please.
How much does that cost?
You're asking the wrong guy. I'm sorry. It is a background check for you, and I believe. Say that again. About 28, 24 bucks, 24, 28 bucks, somewhere right in there. It's not crazy hefty. It lasts for that whole year as we need it, but just for legal purposes. Apologize, Debbie Downer here. To answer your other question, when it comes to putting into our contingency, on that, I want to explain one piece on that. There's two words that kind of get used together and technically are two separate things. So I want to help explain this a little bit. We have the contingency, which is it's part of your budget. You set it in your budget. It's just your little slush fund to cover rainy day expenses. Okay.
But within the current year
It's
budget.
within the current budget, so it's already budgeted. Your contingency is just your overflow line item. So if fuel goes over by 50 bucks, you pull from that line item. It's already in the budget. Your fund balance is your savings account. If you blow through all of your expended budget line items and your contingency, then you start dipping into your savings account and exhausting your savings. So those are the two areas that kind of get confused a lot, and I just want to make sure we understood that. As far as contingency, any revenues that we get this year, the plan is to take them, let me state that again, any extra revenues over what we've already budgeted, the plan is to first, put that into our contingency budget, or contingency line item, as it has to come in and flow there. If we can keep our expenditures down, keep them within budget, keep them from rolling over or exceeding their line items, then those contingency funds would then roll into our savings account, our fund balance, and then can be set up to be stored there as a backup.
Ruben Saldana again. I know I said earlier about a severance package for teachers, and you're kind of looking at a tight budget. I understand that, but is there going to be any kind of aid to try to help these teachers, the other support staff, that so somebody can come in and work with them to see what other jobs there are in the Minicash area or the Twin Falls area? Is that something that's planned to try to help them?
I mentioned this to administrators when we met, and I'm glad you said something because I've yet to follow up with my email. But at my regional superintendent's meeting, I did ask other superintendents what positions they might have available. Some were going through cuts, but depending on where the cuts happen, so if a district cut at the secondary level, they might have elementary positions. And Twin Falls responded to me, and they have a link that I will send out to the principals with their openings. Richfield said they had one. Shoshone said they had two. And so I just need to send this out to the administrators so that, yes, we can get that out to the staff that won't be with us next year.
Okay, have you reached out to the private sector, the McCain of the world, the Simplot of the world? Because I know I've seen some posting on there, because I used to work for those companies, that they're looking for good people.
I haven't done that yet, but I will.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add one little piece to that as well. It won't necessarily benefit the certified as much as it could classified. Our staff knows how short supply our substitutes are. Any staff that will be released, if they want to join our substitute lineup, we are able to roll them in directly. Where they are still currently employed, they don't have to go through the background check or any of that. We can roll them right into there. The one caveat on that, which they hopefully can keep in mind, if they are looking to go for unemployment, again, none of this would take effect until after August, after their final check. But if they're looking for unemployment, they may not want to roll into that, because then that would show that they are employed. So there are a couple options internally that we can use, but use it to your best advantage.
Okay. Ms. Miller.
Brandy Milliron. I just want to clarify something that has been just eating at me. Daryl said that he would take part of the blame for this situation that we're in. I 100% disagree with that. Daryl stepped into a very, very hard situation where our business manager left or was let go. He was asked and applied for this job. He stepped into a very hard situation, and he has worked extremely, extremely hard this year. Not only as business manager, but when we lost 2/3 of our HR, he stepped in and took over HR for the entire district as well as business manager. So for him to say that this is partly his fault, I disagree with that wholeheartedly. He has worked so hard this year to try to pull us out of the situation that we're in, or at least get us honest with our finances and money consolidated in one bank instead of lots of banks. So I want to say thank you, Daryl, for working so hard this year. And I completely do not think this is at all your fault for the situation we're in.
Thank you.
I would just like to say
more.
I agree with that. I mean, I was tasked to be the assistant treasurer for the board. Daryl is our board treasurer, and I've had the opportunity to work quite a bit more than most of the board has with him hand in hand. And yeah, I was not really. Well, I was kind of surprised that you would try and take the blame for that, because I do not believe that you have any blame in that, and so I would again second Mrs. Milliron's comments.
Okay, anybody else like a chance to speak? Sure, Nicole. Go ahead.
I believe your 3 minutes are up.
Okay, I got the green light. I know of someone that has a job available for certificated teachers. It will be at a very good wage, dependent on whether we hire this company.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole. I think that's it's above my pay grade.
Oh, she must be watching us. I don't know. Okay.
Well, we're closing in on 8 o'clock. If no one else has any more comments, does the board have any other comments, questions?
Mr. Sukan, I just want to point out, I know obviously this is different circumstances, but I love how many people are out here. We have board meetings every month. We'd love to see more of you at our board meetings. Honestly, it is. We represent you, and if you know what's going on in the district, I know a lot of you watch online, which is great, but if you know what's going on in the district and can provide us feedback and information, we want to do what's best for our teachers, for our administration, and most importantly, our students. The more involvement we have from our community, the better we will be. So thank you for being here. I appreciate the questions. I appreciate everyone's civility and the way that they've allowed us to address some of these concerns. But please make sure that you continue to come out to our meetings and learn what's going on in the district.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Perez. With that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Oh.
Yeah, we need to.
Oh, we did discuss the action.
Yeah. Well, going on to we had some possible action items listed on the agenda, but with Mr. Larson's recommendation, it doesn't sound like we need to take action on those at this time. So
I'll just state the motion.
yeah, so I don't think we need to make any motions. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I guess with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, motion by Trustee Claridge, second by Trustee Anderson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.